All right. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for Jessica Gorhan and Hanna Flanders' workshop on creating networks to strengthen New Hampshire's local food system. We're looking forward to diving in. But before we get started, I'd like to quickly go over our workshop format. I'm Nikki Kolb, NOFA New Hampshire's Operations Manager, and I'll be moderating this session with fellow NOFA staff members, Chadley Kolb and Laura Andrews. Hi, and thank you. And we're asking everyone to please keep yourselves muted during the call and to type your questions into the chat box throughout our discussion. We'll read out your questions when we get to the Q&A portion of the session at the end. Please do note that we're recording this meeting and all the workshop sessions, which will become available to you after the conference. And now it's my pleasure to introduce again Jessica Gorhan, Food Systems Consultant with Gorhan Consulting, and Hanna Flanders, Director of Community Engagement and co-founder of Kearsarge Food Hub. Welcome, Jessica and Hanna. Thank you.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
I'm Hanna. Jessica, you want to give a little wave?
Hi, I'm Jessica.
I'm going to begin the presentation. I'm so excited to tell you all about our work here at the Kearsarge Food Hub. We are in Bradford, New Hampshire, kind of the central region, and I'm going to get it all ready for Jessica to take it away and tell her a little bit about the grant project that she is working on for the Kearsarge Food Hub in strengthening our statewide network. So first, I would like to acknowledge that our work takes place on Nadakina, which is the traditional ancestral homeland of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples past and present. Of course, we had that wonderful acknowledgement at the beginning of the conference, and if you checked out Paul and Denise's presentation, there's just so much rich history here where we are working, and we are honored to be here, and we're really inspired by the spirit of Native people and how they interact with nature. And also, before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty, we're talking about a lot of distribution stuff today, which is really important to be sure. But I would kind of like to ground us in what's really going on here, which is making connections, especially now with COVID and feeling distant and physical distancing underway. I thought it would be good to start with a poem by Rainer Maria Rilke, which is particularly touching for us here who might be farming and growing food. Bless the spirit that makes connections, for truly we live in what we imagine. Clocks move alongside our real life with steps that are ever the same. Though we do not know our exact location, we are held in place by what links us. Across trackless distances, antennas sense each other. Pure attention. Oh, music of the powers. Distracted by each day's doing, how can we hear the signals? Even as the farmer labors, there where the seed turns into summer, it is not his work. It is earth who gives. I highly suggest Rilke as a poet to turn to in these times. He has a way of kind of celebrating the darkness as an important part of our human experience. But that is not exactly what this presentation is about. So let me dive in to tell you a little bit about the Kearsarge Food Hub. We were established in 2015 here in Bradford, New Hampshire, in the Kearsarge area. It's kind of central New Hampshire region. And our mission is to reinvigorate our community within a restorative local food system by cultivating food sovereignty, growing engaged learners, and nurturing community. We are a nonprofit organization, and we envision a resilient and connected community where everyone is empowered to access healthy food, where local farmers are supported and the land is nourished, and where all people share a common sense of place. Thank you to NOFA in particular for helping to cultivate that same vision. Next, Nikki. Nikki's kindly shepherding the presentation. Yeah, next to the pictures. So we have a pretty diverse organization in terms of all the things that we're trying to do. And I'll just quickly tell you a little bit about it to give you some context, and then we're going to move into the food access piece. Here we have a little photo collage of what we do, and I'll go from top to bottom, left to right. We have B is a market supervisor at Sweet Beet Market, which is our year-round local food market. She's standing behind a food donation that's about to be delivered to a local food pantry. Then there I am chatting with some first graders during COVID time. So we're outside, I'm standing next to a raised bed that we built for the school with some college students who are also learning a little bit through the process. We love working with the first graders. They're adorable and eager, and our educational programming spans from that age group all the way through college level. And we're working really hard to figure out more what we can offer to our local students to get them really excited about local food. Over there on the right, that's Sweet Beet Farm. That's our growing operation. When we began, we were certain that we wanted to grow our own food so that we could learn exactly what farmers are up against here in the New Hampshire climate, and also so we could explore the regenerative practices that we knew in our hearts were really important to building soil, working in harmony with nature, producing nutritious and delicious foods for our community. So we have some high tunnels, we have some fields, we're gonna dip into hopefully some fruit trees, and I was super inspired by Keith's presentation, some nut trees. So there's a lot to explore there. On the bottom left, that is our location for Sweet Beet Market. We do not own this building, but a couple of gentlemen here in town purchased this old abandoned inn, and collaboratively we've been renovating the space, breathing new life into this side of Main Street with other partners like Evergreen Healing Arts, where they run a yoga studio. So definitely check them out. Kathleen and Sage are there in our commercial kitchen in that building. They're processing some basil to make some pesto, one of our favorites. Pierre, our farm manager there, is amending the soil, and we're super grateful for NOFA's bulk ordering program and all of the supplies listed there. We definitely make really good use of all of those things to manage our soil organically, and we're underway in our organic certification. And finally, that's Garrett, everybody's favorite. Everybody loves Garrett. He is also a co-founder. He's running the bakery. We also do prepared foods for Thanksgiving and things like that, and we have a lot to explore in our kitchen, and we're really excited to see where that takes us. Okay, so as a food hub, food hubs actively manage the aggregation and distribution of local food, and that is also a big part of what we do. So we source from, we started as a small farm stand, sourcing from 30 producers within a 30-mile radius. We've definitely grown our radius, but still hyper local. We source from probably 50 plus farmers and producers and vendors of all kinds within a 50-mile radius or so at this point, including our own farm. We also source from regional distributors like Associated Buyers, Frontier Co-op, and other food hubs. So Food Connects is a big one for us, helps us connect with farms along the Connecticut River Valley down into Massachusetts, and New Hampshire Community Seafood. We love supporting sustainable seafood. Just started sourcing from Genuine Local, and there's so much room for more collaboration with other food hubs, which is going to be the second part of this presentation. We take all that stuff, we use our coordination, our storage, our transportation, our high tech, which is handmade spreadsheets. You know, there's sourcing software out there, you pay money, and they're all great, I'm sure, but we decided to test out our own kind of ordering system with our own spreadsheets. It's really complicated, and special thanks to France, who manages that, and Lauren as well. Our staff and volunteers make it all possible, and we have our admin and our overhead, and we're a nonprofit, so we use our fundraising and our grants and all of that to fund this. I did want to note our team is a board of 5. It's a working board, currently of 5, about to expand, all volunteers. Thank you so much. We have a staff of 9. And last year we had between 40 and 50 community volunteers that helped out in various areas of our organization. So all these folks and all of this infrastructure come together to source from that group and then distribute at these various access points in our community. So food access partners, we work with 4+ food pantries on a weekly or monthly basis. We work with 2 school backpack programs on a regular basis, and we distribute through our own Sweet Beet Market and our super close friends at Warner Public Market over in Warner. And we've dabbled in some wholesale. We've distributed to some restaurants and such, but less of that happening now, definitely because of COVID and also just a limited staff. And we're really trying to focus on the food access bit. So we've been focusing our efforts there more recently. All right, so here's a little visual representation of our own network. The red dots represent the incoming food, so our food producer and farmer partners, and the green dots represent the outgoing food. So bringing in all that food from all those people and then sending it out to those locations. I'm really excited to tell you about our 2020 impact. We have been looking at the numbers, and it's pretty exciting to see the impact we've been able to have in terms of sending money directly to farmers by purchasing on a year-round basis, and then both donating that food and selling that food in the community. So we purchased almost $100,000 worth of produce specifically, over $60,000 worth of meat products, over $35,000 worth of dairy, over $10,000 worth of eggs, like the perfect food. Everybody loves eggs. And seafood, a little over 7,000 for now. So that's exciting. And we purchase most of that food. So the gleaning program is, taking food from the farm that wouldn't normally be harvested, taking that and donating it. That's a great program. Our infrastructure, we use our nonprofit resources to mostly purchase that food from farmers and then donate it to food pantries and school backpack programs. So last year we donated 17,000 pounds of food, over $31,000 worth of food. That's produce, some meat, some grocery items, like for the kids that we work with through the school backpack program, granola bars, hummus, ready to eat foods is really important, and our own baked goods that we bake on site. So that's distributed to 7+ food access partners, reaching 200+ households in our service area. Last year, we saw a 737% increase in our food donations, which is a lot. And that had a lot to do with COVID hitting and us realizing that's a really important direction for our organization to move into. And we also work closely with those people running the food pantries and the school backpack programs to coordinate what they want, rather than us saying, here's the food you get this week. They're saying, we want this, this, and this, and then we're ordering that for them, organizing it, and volunteers mostly are delivering that food. So that's a great program. Sweet Beet Farm grew 13,395 pounds of food last year, and we happily aggregated almost $40,000 worth of food for our friends at Warner Public Market. All right, so that's what we're doing in our service area actively. We wanted to learn what else needs to be happening. So back in 2019 was when the report came out from a 2-year grant study from the local food promotion program, trying to assess the needs and opportunities, both in our radius, which we did define as 30 miles at the time, a 30-mile radius. We wanted to conduct a value chain assessment in that service area to learn who is growing what and where. And then the other side of it, who's buying food and what do they need to be able to purchase more local foods. And the second piece of that grant was to develop a collaborative statewide focus group and resulting action plan, basically to take a step back and look at the entire food network of New Hampshire and see where we could collaborate, share resources, and increase our distribution impact statewide. All right, so I think it's a little blurry, but the graph, figure A there, regional food hubs and the Kearsarge area food shed. So we wanted to demonstrate, like, why are we looking at the service area, the Kearsarge area, which is that orange circle. So it was interesting to look at the other existing food hubs at the time and all the farms they work with to kind of get a sense of where there was a lot of activity and where there wasn't a lot of activity. And you can see that within our service area, there's definitely room for more food hub activity. And so in order to get a sense of the needs and opportunities, we began collecting data. We did online surveys and interviews and site visits with 25 farms, 15 restaurants, and 6 institutions. And of course, we're collecting data on farm revenue, crops, farm size, and then we're looking at restaurants. What are you buying? Where is there room to buy more local? What are the barriers to purchasing local food? And at the same time, we were looking at building relationships, right? If we need to go visit someone to collect this data, it's also about meeting the person who's behind the work. And how can we start to have the conversations that will hopefully lead us to deeper collaboration? And through that, 100% of institutions, 75% of restaurants, and 88% of farms were willing to deepen their collaboration and work with the food hub. So that was really cool. And if you want to learn more about the grant, I'm going to put the link to the full report in the chat, and that will be in just a little bit. So the important pieces of this report for our needs today is we identified the top needs, which really translate to opportunities, right? So transportation. 79% of the folks surveyed said transportation is a huge need. Who is going to bring the food from point A farm to food hub to the, where it's ending up ultimately? Networking, a processing facility. All the raw goods that we grow are really, really great, but something like an institution and even a restaurant might be interested in more lightly processed foods. Farm equipment sharing. There are a lot of pieces of equipment that farms might use, a very short period of time in the year. How can we help share those resources so it's not such a cost burden to each farm in particular? And then there's marketing and branding. So when we figured out those top needs, the whole point of this grant report was to come out with some recommendations so that we could take the next step to address those needs. We had 4 recommendations, but the most important one and the one that's getting the most kind of action right now is the third recommendation, to establish a statewide food hub network to support New Hampshire's food value chain by building trust, creating a shared vision, and coordinating efforts. So like I mentioned about the relationship building, it is definitely about coordinating efforts, sharing infrastructure, but it's also about building trust. Because something that we learn, if you're a small farmer in New Hampshire and we're talking about collaboration, well, it's reasonable to think about how is this going to impact my bottom line? So if we can start to build trust and figure out how to do it equitably so that everybody is actually benefiting from this network, that's a really important bit. All right, next slide. Okay, so what is a food hub network? It is a new and innovative model in which food hubs and key value chain stakeholders across a state or region collaborate formally or informally to share best practices, resources, and business services to buy, sell, and distribute from each other. So to dive into what that means, like what does that mean, we decided to continue our grant research, and we got a specialty crop block grant awarded to us. And we found, luckily, Jessica Gorhan applied for the project leadership job. And so she's taken everything that we just learned in this grant and she's applying it to her work to figure out exactly what a food hub network can look like in New Hampshire. So I'm excited to pass the baton on to Jessica so that she can share her work in that area.
Thanks, Hannah. Great job setting the stage for food hubs and what food hubs do, and then the grant processes leading up to this project. It was Kearsarge Food Hub has done really amazing work laying the groundwork for this project. So I was hired on back in end of March, early April of 2020 to start this New Hampshire Food Hub Network project. I have been working closely with the 5 original food hubs that were part of this grant application for the specialty crop block grant. So you'll see Kearsarge Food Hub on here, as well as Fresh Start Farms, which is a part of the Organization for Refugee and Immigrant Success, Three River Farmers Alliance, Food Connects, and the Belknap Foodshed, which is also genuine local. So they are also now selling food from their offices and also have their production kitchen as well. Next. So the specialty crop block grant had 4 different objectives, and those objectives were to complete a SWOT analysis of all of the hubs participating, conduct a logistical analysis of product movement, and facilitate a network development retreat, which because of COVID, we haven't been able to do, but we've had some fun virtual happy hour events, and we've had other presentation events where we've looked at the SWOT analysis together and a little bit of the logistics, and we'll continue to get together, I believe, on Thursday evenings to chat about how we can improve logistics and start working together on other parts of the project. And the last objective is to develop an implementation plan. So that will be towards the end of this grant, my part of this project, which will be next month. I'll be wrapping up and putting together like next steps for this project. Next. So this is a combination of what came out of the SWOT analysis. I spent about an hour and a half to 3 hours with each food hub completing this analysis. So sometimes we would sit together for one session, or it took us multiple sessions to get through the questions, because it was really truly like digging right in there and finding out like what's going on with New Hampshire food hubs and what do they need. But I love the strengths. Everybody said their staff attitudes were great. They all had great relationships with their customers as well as their farmers. They all were able to, during COVID times, like change their sales models on a dime. It was amazing to see all of the work that happened in order to serve people and keep people safe during COVID-19 for their shopping needs. And the other thing that happened almost instantly was the sales between other hubs. And that was a great strength, that the hubs were able to start communicating through this project right away together and helping to make sure the customers had everything that they needed. Because as some of you may know as customers or as farmers or as food hubs, that once you put all of your food out online, it was selling out almost instantly. So it was really important to have that hub network where the sales were happening between hubs. The things that we're really focusing on, like some of the common weaknesses. So that's where we're looking at this grant and saying, you know, what are those next steps? How can we make those weaknesses strengths? So we're looking at improved technology and having, using technology to communicate between the hubs for sales or for logistics. sharing. We need increased dry and cold storage, sometimes sourcing products. So if there's something that's been really popular, trying to find out like where else can we purchase it from. Doing an analysis of the different hub business models, that was a weakness. The different hubs felt like that's something that they need somebody to come in and spend some more time in, and that follows up with the technical assistance. The nice part is that also leads into, opportunities. So the food hubs have become customers with each other. Direct to consumer has been a huge opportunity, especially given COVID times. And we're hoping that that trend continues. We know that there may be some drop off in sales as we go back to somewhat normal life with grocery shopping, but we're really hoping to continue those direct to consumer sales and home delivery, as well as potentially getting more local food in the retail market. There are really, again, the strong relationships. Food hubs are becoming education spaces about local food, and nutrition education is really huge. Also for farming practices. I know that some of the hubs are doing different farming workshops, so that has been really great. And then again, like more local food processing. So taking our local food and producing local products out of it. And looking at the threats, we talked a little bit about the stability of increased business. So that part where the direct to consumer might reduce a little bit as times go back to normal. So thinking of ahead of time, like how can we prevent that from becoming a threat? We know that climate change is a constant threat right now. We know that there was a wholesale market crash during COVID times. Restaurants and institutions weren't buying as much as they were prior to COVID. It's hard for new farmers to get into the business. So how can we make it easier? And so we're working with, we were actually just talking about this before the session started, but we had a question and answer session with Annie Custer, talking to her about some of the federal regulations that prevent new farmers from getting started. We are looking at seasonality. How can we expand the products that are being offered from, that short period of time, like for instance, strawberry season? How can we make strawberries available more throughout the year? And what does that look like if we're purchasing locally? Potentially working with distributors to help distribute the product. So food hubs becoming aggregators, and then having turning distributors from a threat to an opportunity, taking a look at that. And the same with grocers, turning our grocers from a threat into a common opportunity. So great. So that was what came out of our SWOT analysis. When we talked to farms and food organizations, so after we did the SWOT analysis, we also did interviews with other farm and food orgs, and we asked them what would their ideal scenario be if a statewide food hub network was developed. It was really important to make sure we had as many different farm and food businesses and their voices at the table. I'm constantly interviewing new farms and food businesses. So it's kind of a changing number, but we've interviewed about 15 at this point. And we're looking at, a lot of them said there really needed to be a backbone organization that would really hold the mission, vision, and goals of the Food Hub Network. They thought that it was also important to really keep those Food Hub principles there around sustainability, environmental impact, and social justice. They also thought it was great to have shared infrastructure. If there's shared staff, storage, technology, or transportation that's owned by the network as a whole versus each individual food hub having to bear the burden of those expenses. Shared marketing and branding has been a huge one that is not just come up between the farms and the food businesses that I've spoken to, but all of the food hubs feel that this is really important too. And figuring out like, what is that statewide local food marketing and branding that we can really, everybody can get behind and put out into New Hampshire so that New Hampshire's local food economy becomes stronger and more visible. And then looking at a cooperative model where each hub, farm, and producer can have ownership and decision-making in the Food Hub network. It's really been important to all the foods, as Hanna talked about, to really look at food security and food sovereignty. So we're looking at food waste management and gathering excess from the producers and distributing regionally, maybe minimizing some of the trips that the gleaners are making, and the gleaners can pick up from the hubs as aggregators, or maybe even from a central location. We are looking, everybody thought it would be a great idea to have some centralized locations. So a place where there can be light processing and aggregation, something that might exist in both rural and urban settings. And also working together with a centralized location to avoid unintended consequences like creating food deserts. They also felt that this was a great opportunity for economic development. Creating a food hub network creates jobs. It improves farmer viability. It allows to expand the sales region outside of New Hampshire. So some of that is already happening. Food is being, purchased by food hub partners, and it's being distributed outside of our state. And they feel like this is also an opportunity for the state agricultural department to get involved, because this would be a statewide project that brings a lot of different agricultural partners together to create that economic development. And having a local wholesale marketplace, so having one place where hubs can buy and sell from each other food hub networks can purchase from the network, local retailers and distributors can purchase, customers know the product is made and grown in New Hampshire, they can look up the product information on that marketplace. So these are things that farms and food organizations thought were really important to consider while we're developing a food hub network. Next. So this is a map of where all the different food hub network locations are. Recently, we've added the root cellar, which is a part of Taproot, and they're up in the North Country, so that furthest up north dot. And when we do an analysis to show the recommendation for centralized distribution, it's just a little bit north of Concord, which means that that would be a place where most of the hubs could get to really easily, but it could look even more different than that. So I'm going to go ahead and advance to the next slide. So here's a picture that Paul Karpowicz, who interned with me over the summer, put together. And this is what that could look like if you had a centralized distribution center. You could have all of the hubs feeding into the distribution center, and then transportation leaving from there to deliver to homes, to markets, to schools and institutions, maybe to retail markets or restaurants, and also for food donations to go to the food bank. Now, one of the things that's not in this particular image or model is that sometimes the hubs would be aggregating within their hub location. So their hubs become distribution centers too. So Food Connects is in Burlington, and they do some business with Kearsarge Food Hub. They may take their delivery that's going to the centralized distribution center and bring it to Kearsarge, and then Kearsarge would bring it, so that Food Connects wouldn't have to travel all of that way into that northern Concord location. And the same with the other partners. There's always opportunities for figuring out how to get those logistics worked out so we can aggregate product and then get it delivered. So this is what the supply chain workflow would look like. Great. And again, we have discussed our guiding principles and policies. It's important to really have an emphasis and keep a racial equity lens on the work that we're doing, really focusing on climate resilience. As Hanna spoke a lot about, really looking at food justice and making sure that fresh, affordable local food is available to everyone, and farmer advocacy, really making sure that our farmers have the support that they need to do their really good work in growing local food, and making sure that that can be easier and more affordable for them so that they can make a living wage as well. Next. So we had a virtual happy hour, which was a lot of fun. And during that virtual happy hour, we talked about what were the popular products in 2020, and what did we see are these like potential new items that that we could start creating products or selling, and through the food hubs, like what were things that people were asking for that maybe we didn't have a really good access to. So you can see, I'll have 2 slides of this because there was just so much, there were so many products out there that were popular this year, but we had butter, eggs, strawberry, all the berries, fresh fish, asparagus, breads, broccoli, greens, potatoes. But potential new items were frozen berries, because sometimes if berries are traveling quite a distance, they're not going to make it always to the customer. And it depends on if there's refrigeration available for the transportation or not. We also know that frozen prepared meals are becoming important. And if they're made from local foods, how much better is that to have healthy frozen prepared meals? And more organic fruits. There was increased request for organic fruits. And we had a duck meal that night, which was delicious. And so more duck came up, and that was from the restaurant side of things. Next. Flour and grains became really popular this year. As everybody knows, people were staying home. So what do you do when you're home? You bake and have comfort foods to help relieve the stress of the pandemic. So flours and grains were really popular. And so we see that was a popular product, but it's also a potential new item in New Hampshire, is producing more New Hampshire grown grains that are then processed down into flours. Same with butters and cheeses. The sourcing for that is a little bit challenging. So potentially having more places to purchase butter and cheese from, improving beer and wine sales between the hubs and to direct consumer, and looking at like value added staple products as potential new items. Tomatoes were really popular this year. The flexible fish membership with New Hampshire Community Seafood was really popular. Cheeses, chocolates, your winter greens and cabbage. So a lot of new popular products. Next. So the next thing we're looking at is implementation. How do we get there? So one thing is we are looking at increasing buying and selling between the hubs. It will be really important to have, the New Hampshire Food Hub network having a staff person that can help coordinate sales between hubs, somebody that's talking to all the hubs all the time, kind of finding out what their needs are and how to get them connected to each other. So that would be a project manager that can help to identify those opportunities. And not just to food hubs in New Hampshire, but there's also a New England Food Hub network. And then there's the Eastern Food Hub Collaborative that starts in Maine and goes all the way down to South Carolina. And again, that will help to expand seasonality and help to support local foods in other states. And again, it would be, really looking at shared distribution for some of those larger food hub networks that take, for instance, the Eastern Food Hub Collaborative. That food would kind of piggyback its way up to New Hampshire. So it would really looking at climate resiliency and making sure that we're streamlining the distribution process so there's less vehicles on the road and less empty vehicles. That's a big part of that. That goes into that shared distribution and cross-docking part. How can we make sure that when a truck leaves a food hub, it's leaving full of food, going and doing deliveries and coming back to the hub full of food? And how can we make sure that 2 hubs aren't driving to the same place on the same day, crossing paths? Is there an opportunity for them to cross-dock or aggregate somewhere else so that they're only making 1 delivery to a customer for both hubs versus having 2 trucks on the road driving that distance? I can say I did some food delivery during the virtual happy hour, making sure everybody had their food. And I had to have 3 drivers, and it still took like each of us around like 3.5 hours to drive all around the state each. So combined, about 10.5 hours of driving in a day to get to all different points. So, as we know in New Hampshire, our highway infrastructure is minimal, so it does take us quite a way, quite a bit of time to get from one end of the state to the other. So as many times that you can have shared distribution or cross docking is certainly helpful and saves a lot of time, money, and saves the environment. The next part of it that we're really looking at is the business model and technology. So what would the Food Hub network look like as its own potentially neutral organization where all the hubs are owners of the Food Hub network and maybe farms? So thinking about what does that model look like? Is it a cooperative? Is it a workers co-op? What type of business model would that organization be? And then what type of technology would work to have those online sales between the hubs and handling logistics? So we've talked to a lot of different technology companies and learned a lot about what they can offer. There's some really great ones out there. A lot of our organizations our food hubs work with local food marketplace, which is a great one. So we're really still investigating that and having conversations as the network to figure out what will fit best. So these are the food hubs that we're working with and all of the contact information. So if there's a certain food hub that might be in your neck of the woods, maybe you'd like to get connected or learn more about the project, feel free to contact anybody here. And next. Hannah, so that's the end of my part of the presentation. Hanna has a couple of questions for all of you, and then I think we're going into our Q&A for you to ask us questions too. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Awesome research. There's so much potential here. It's so exciting. One bit that I wanted to include, and we definitely wanted to leave room for good discussion if anybody had questions, because this is honestly a big nut to crack. We're trying to figure out something that's never been done before, which is collaboratively sharing local resources in a modern world with technology, and also in a world where we're reckoning with racial equity, like Jessica mentioned. So it brought to our attention this idea of food security or food sovereignty. So we've been talking a lot about food security since our inception, and food security is defined by the Food and Agriculture Organization as when all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious foods that meet their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. Now, I've been challenged recently on this concept. I'm not sure if anybody here follows A Growing Culture. If you don't, I highly recommend you do, in terms of how we connect this food business we're all talking about and working in with the element of social justice. And there's a lot of work to do in this area. Food sovereignty is the idea that the right of peoples to access healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically and sustainable methods, and their right to define their own food and agriculture systems. So this puts the aspirations and needs of those who produce, distribute, and consume food at the heart of the conversation, instead of the markets and corporations that tend to guide all the business of the more industrial food system. So when you're talking about food security and you're just talking about making sure everybody has enough food, are you asking them what kind of food they prefer? Is it taking into account culturally appropriate food? Is it inviting voices to the table that aren't at the table to start making those decisions on various levels of the food system? I love a growing culture puts it this way. We must stop seeing food security as the pathway to eradicating hunger. It reduces food to an economic commodity when food is the basis of culture, the basis of life itself. Food sovereignty is the pathway to imagining something fundamentally different, something better. So as we're talking about building out these networks and all the important logistics along the way that Jessica was mentioning, there's a ton of details to iron out and a lot of conversations to have. I love this idea of who are we centering in those conversations and whose voices aren't at the table that really need to be. So this is where we're all invited in this food business, wherever you are on the chain of it, to consider the social justice piece and think about who are we centering in our work. I think there's a lot to do there. Nikki, you can hop on the next slide, which hopefully will invite some discussion. Be great to hear from people if you want to pop in the chat. I'm sorry, I was just reading some comments already in the chat, getting ahead of myself. It would be great to hear if anybody has any ideas about where you see opportunities for more collaboration, equitable distribution. Jessica is talking about the broader view of statewide, but maybe you're in a community and you see some unused resources or infrastructure or potential partnerships. So if you want to think about that for a minute, maybe pop something in the chat if you have any ideas. The other thing I was interested in was, now that this pandemic is underway and the landscape of our communities and businesses have changed so much, are there any opportunities in this new way of things? Particularly, I'm thinking about restaurants, school kitchens, college kitchens. Is there a way to make the best use of this time in terms of figuring out how to distribute food and use infrastructure? No easy answers here, but something interesting to think about for sure.
Yeah, definitely, Hannah. And being creative. And again, like the whole part of this presentation is building those networks. So, there's been huge movement in being in the inter-hub sales this year, which was really great, in working together as a network. And there were even opportunities where we already started sharing some of those logistics, which really did help to build some of the relationships between the hubs. And I also am, some of you know, I'm the executive director of the Greater Nashua Food Council, which is another collaboration and another network. And I was looking at your first question, Hannah, and looking at opportunities for more equitable distribution of food in your community. And in Nashua prior to COVID-19, we piloted mobile produce pantries, which simply is a table and chairs with boxes of produce available in our most vulnerable communities. And 2 volunteers would sit at the table and for 1 hour just hand out free fresh produce. And we worked in 5 different neighborhoods in 2019. In 2020, we partnered with the Nashua School District and the Nashua Transit System, and we offered fresh produce at 10 Title I schools, as well as all the bus stops where the kids were picking up their school meals. They were also able to pick up produce. And then we had 10 community locations. So we had a total of 36 locations where families could pick up, well, anybody, actually, all residents, it wasn't just families, could pick up free fresh produce in their communities. So, and that was through a network. So it was all partners working together. Some were dropping off the food, some were providing the volunteers, some were clearing the locations ahead of time. So all of those partners really came into play to make sure there was equitable distribution of food in the community.
Thank you. Are there other slides here or should we go into the Q&A?
Q&A.
Okay, great. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Thank you both so much for your presentation. That was really helpful and exciting. Laura, do you have a question from chat that you could share? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I just have a couple. First one, simple one, could you add your contact info to the chat if you're willing to share it? I saw Jessica added it.
Yeah.
And then have you made any contacts in Carroll County, and are there points of resistance, and what might they be if there are?
Good question. Jessica, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I'd have to look at which county root cellar and taproot is in, but that is in the North Country up there by Coos County. So we have started making some connections up there, but definitely working on building the network more in the North Country. And what was the second part of that question, Laura? I'm sorry.
Are there points of resistance, and what are they, if there are any?
We haven't really come upon any yet. Everybody seems really open to working with each other and really excited. And we haven't come across anybody that's really against this project. Everybody seems really for it.
I will note there is, if we're asking farmers to sell wholesale when they have mostly direct to consumer, I would, there's probably going to be a little resistance in the price difference in terms of what they're getting in return. So I think outlining all of the other value that we've been talking about, sharing marketing and branding, taking some of the work off of the farmers' backs and doing all those other aspects of their business might provide that additional value to make, the wholesale prices they might receive in this kind of distribution model worth it.
Okay, so Ellen asked if you could talk about the interface with pantries and charities as referenced in her comment. Looks like she mentioned that some food pantries and charities don't include diverse voices, people of color, people dealing with food insecurity and sovereignty, culturally, religious important food. For example, don't give free pork to folks that eat kosher or halal, and don't give vegans meat and say, oh, but it's free and you can't be picky.
Yeah.
Definitely an issue. Thanks, Ellen, for bringing that up. Through some of the work that I do in the state, I'm a part of the COVID equity task force, and I work in the food security group, and together with the immigration team and some other statewide partners, we put together a culturally appropriate or ethnic foods grocery list for pantries. So we do have that available, and I'm happy to send it to anybody who wants it, or I can send it to Nikki and she can have that available too for anybody that requests it. But it lists all the food items that a pantry can give to their donors when they go grocery shopping to provide food to the pantries.
Yeah, that's great, Jessica. On our end of things, with our relationship with food pantries and schools, it's all about the conversations that you have with the clients that they serve. So the pantries that we work with, the volunteers usually who run those pantries, have direct relationships with the families that they serve. And so they know their needs and they communicate those needs to us. And then whatever we source or send is something that the clients want. And something in a language shift that I've been thinking about recently is moving away from the concept of charity and toward a concept of solidarity. So really standing with people when they need a hand, and less of this handout kind of attitude of I have this and you get that and you get what you get because you don't have a choice. It's shifting that whole way we look at it to say, we're going to stand with you and let's hear what you need. And so we can give you the appropriate things that you actually want.
Absolutely. There was a question in the chat that was just sent directly to me, but it was, is there any issue with state and food safety regs when distributing fresh food? Only if the food becomes like changed from its whole state. So as far as produce and vegetables go, as long as you have not cut it or washed it or done anything with it, it can be lightly washed or processed for transportation. But anytime the food is chopped, then you have to deal with public health regulations around food safety.
And that's where a food processing center that focuses on getting those food safety regulations in place is really important, and definitely one of the lacking areas right now.
Great, thank you. Steve is wondering if you had any thoughts about working to change arcane commerce restrictions like USDA inspection requirements, which restrict ability to get meat products to consumers except through direct sales.
Yes, we just had a statewide Q&A with Annie Custer and her team. She is going to be on the ag committee this year, and she wanted to hear feedback from all of our statewide ag partners, and that came up as one of the things that we will be really pushing through policy advocacy this year, is making sure that GAP certifications become easier, FSMA becomes easier, and meat processing becomes easier.
Thank you.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So Amy asked, have there been any conversations about expanding food access to older adults, especially during the pandemic, possibly combined with other wellness related check-ins?
That's a great one. I realized I skimmed over that in one of my slides. We've worked with the senior center here in town just a couple of times. And it's definitely an area that we would love to move into more. The food pantries that we serve definitely do serve the older population. And then the schools kind of hit younger population and the family vibe, but there's a lot of work to do, I think, connecting to the older population, and organizations like Kearsarge Neighborhood Partners just emerged last winter here in our area. Their whole kind of business model, their nonprofit, is to mobilize community members, volunteers, to serve the needs of the community. And I think that kind of structure, their whole job is to assess the needs and bring people where they're needed. So shoveling for older folks, going into assisted living facilities and bringing food from the pantry into the assisted living facilities, delivering wood, doing those home checks, all of that. There's a lot of room to grow in that area for sure.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I know a lot of the hubs each did fundraising for donated foods. So, and to allow home delivery of those foods to seniors. Also hubs, like when somebody doesn't have access to the technology, they're taking phone calls, they're going through the product list with the person over the phone and taking their orders over the phone to help out. And then there's organizations like Meals on Wheels that are doing great jobs making sure they're checking in on people at home, making sure they do get those well checks, and connecting them to other members of the community to make sure that they are having like some socialization. And I know that the United Way of Greater Nashua did a Shop United program this year, where anybody who felt unsafe going grocery shopping, they were able to send their grocery list to the United Way, and a designated volunteer would go out and shop for that person and bring their groceries directly to them. So there were, I saw a lot of ways throughout the state, people making sure that seniors were taken care of.
That's great. Wonderful. Thank you. Denise says, great work, and asks if you have looked into Franklin as a central food hub site. She has a vague memory of someone talking about this as a possibility in the Franklin revitalization.
We haven't yet, but that's great to know.
Okay.
Wonderful. Are there any more questions? Maybe we could take one more or
There's one more. I'm not sure
okay.
who it's from, but any concerns about good quality meat and dairy, getting good quality meat and dairy to low income communities?
Concerns.
I do think that that does become an issue at times just because local meats can be a little bit more expensive than what you find at the grocery store. And what I highly recommend is that really promoting the Granite State Market Match program where people can buy, they're using their SNAP and EBT dollars. They can buy from farmers markets and local farm vendors, and those dollars get doubled. So they have to, half of that money gets purchased on veggies, but the other half of the money that gets doubled can be spent on any items within the farm stand or the farmer's market.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that. I know our friends at Warner Public Market in Warner accept SNAP and EBT, and they're a similar business model as our own Sweet Beet Market here in Bradford in terms of aggregating all sorts of local goods for sale. And we will also at Sweet Beet be accepting SNAP and EBT soon, and definitely curious to help spread the word on SNAP and EBT because it is a really effective program, putting dollars right into people's pockets that they can then use on local food.
Yeah, and Fresh Start Farms is a part of ORIS. They also accept SNAP and EBT for their farm shares. So you can use your SNAP and EBT dollars for fresh produce that way too. And they do sell local meats as well.
And one more thing before we wrap up, just now that we have all these folks together, we're partnering with the Noel Hagen Band, the Abenaki Nation here, and Warner Public Market to do a film screening of Gather on March 5th. The information is at kearsargefoodhub.org. It's completely free. And then we're going to have a community conversation about how to support Native Americans and their culturally appropriate foods locally. And there's, again, a lot of room to grow in that area. And Sherry's here. Hi, Sherry. Sherry Gould is going to be helping to lead the discussion, and I'm really excited about it. So pop on, register. It's completely free, and join the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this really informative conversation, your presentation, and for everyone's engagement. I'm going to pop just a couple more links into the chat there. I'm going to pull up one more little screen before we go. Bear with me for a second. All right. Yeah, so thank you again. As I mentioned, this was really a wonderful presentation. Your work is exciting. We all look forward to hearing more and seeing how we can continue to collaborate across the food system. So NOFA New Hampshire, as you all may know if you've attended several sessions today, is celebrating our 50th birthday this year. NOFA is, and we welcome you to become a member and continue to be part of our community and our growing network. We do have scholarship memberships available as well, so cost doesn't have to be a barrier. In the chat, I put some links to our exhibitor fair as well as our bookstore, and 20% of proceeds go back to support NOFA New Hampshire throughout the year from the bookstore. The exhibitor fair also has more information in it and some coupon codes and things like that from various vendors, so definitely check that out, and that'll be up throughout the year as well. And we're looking forward to our next and final workshop of today, day one of the conference, and that's coming up at 4:15, Earth Repair Here and Abroad with author and journalist Judith Schwartz. So definitely check that out. We hope to see you there, and also tomorrow for another full and exciting day of winter conference. Thank you all so much again.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.